Computer.
There's a metaphor that keeps popping into my head regarding refuge over the years, and it's really only gotten strong. And in some ways, maybe was triggered by a comment Geshe Nima, my root guru, said many years ago, which was he was thinking about either becoming an army general or a monk. And one of the ways that I often think about taking refuge is, and especially I renew my bodhisattva vows daily, and most of you, or many of you, may do that as well. And I always feel like I'm in front of the recruiting officer of this spiritual army who, by renewing that refuge and that vow to work on behalf of sentient beings, that somehow I'm recommitting to being part of this bodhisattva army. There is a term out there, the bodhisattva warrior is kind of a, but I just share that because it actually feels quite helpful in the context of managing your day in, day out activities, because once you've enlisted in this army, as any of you know who served or know someone who served, you know, it's a round the clock, 24/7, 365 enlistment. And it's just like that for us. Once we decide that we're going to join this army, take refuge, you know, we've signed up. And, you know, of course, in this army, there's sort of this option. You can go AWOL and no one will come after you but yourself. So,
Yep.
so, as we take refuge and say the prayers this morning, I mean, I just invite you to kind of feel happy that you've decided to join this army of bodhisattva warriors, not just for this lifetime, but for countless future lifetimes, uplifting all of consciousness in every realm in whatever way you're able to. And let that be your refuge, your future accomplishments in some ways is the refuge. Anyway, that's a lot of mixed messages. What the heck? All right, soldiers. Here we go. Let's do this in Tibet. Keeping in mind, you know, your recruiting officer and all the generals and bodhisattvas and Buddhas are surrounding you, as are literally, whether you envision it or not, you are completely surrounded by sentient beings in every realm.
All those we're fighting for.
Yeah. Huh?
All the ones we're fighting for.
That's right. Sangye Chodam Soki Chodam La Chochu Badu Dakmi Kyatsuchi Daki Chinyan Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Penshir Sangye Parsho Sangye Chodam Soki Chodam La Chochu Badu Dakmi Kyatsuchi Daki Chinyan Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Penshir Sangye Drupasho Sangye Charam Soki Chotnam La Jamchu Badu Dagni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chinson Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Penshir Sangye Drupasho. And our background intention all the time and everything we're doing, the four immeasurables, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that knows no suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And refreshing your visualization or your recollection that you're surrounded by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and sentient beings. And we're all moving together towards the great enlightenment. And feeling inspired and motivated to try to understand the subtle meaning of what we're about to say, the seven limb prayer. Not just say it from our mouth, but to, especially in your own free times, to contemplate what these seven lines might mean um, as we direct them towards those on the path ahead of us. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara ends, and turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment. Of course, the greatest offering and the greatest accomplishment is to achieve the state of an enlightened consciousness that experiences the union of bliss and emptiness through their practice and their day in, day out, perpetual abiding in a purified state. And what greater offering could we make than to envision this purified realm that we are striving to generate through our collective efforts, and will generate through our collective efforts, one at a time. So let's say it in English. This visualized pure realm. This is what these lines are describing, this visualized pure realm. This ground, anointed by perfume and strewn with flowers. The door I mount your room, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine it as a Buddha field and offer it. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratnam Dhavalakam Niryatayami.
These pure lands that is mentioned in that prayer, that may all beings enjoy this pure land. Well, we haven't talked about this much at all, but within cyclic existence, there are pure lands, pure Buddha fields or Buddha realms where one can be reborn if one has made the as far enough along the path. So you can be reborn in one of these realms or pure lands in order to continue um, the path to enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So I thought, reading that in English brings that up, and that's important for us to contemplate that it's a possibility. We're going to open with meditation that Geshe Nima gave us on the actual exchange of self and other, because this is the focus of this particular mindfulness, the mindfulness recollecting sentient beings. So we begin by first breathing in positive energy and breathing out our habitual attachment and self-centeredness. Next, we breathe in positive energy and breathe out our habitual anger, fear, and guilt. Third, we breathe in positive energy and breathe out our habitual misconceptions and confusion. We've been under the control of the self-centered attitude since beginningless time. Within the short span of our life, we've not been able to control our own emotions. We've often been the slave of our negative emotions and negative propensities. We never have had the conviction to go beyond these negativities. If we think of the Buddha, the Bodhisattvas, and many, many others who have spent their whole life for the benefit of others, we come to realize that other-centered beings always fulfill their own wishes and the wishes of others. Instead of giving in to our self-centered attitude, we now change our orientation from a self-centered being to an other-centered being. We become an other-centered being. That is, we replace our self-centered attitude with the other-centered attitude. The actual exchange of self and other doesn't mean I become you and you become me. It means that I reorient my way of thinking. So far, I've considered my benefit and myself as more important than others. Now, instead of thinking in that way, I reorient my mental focus. I consider others more important than the self-centered me. Every being wants happiness, and no being wants suffering. All beings are the same in this. If I compare my well-being to the well-being of all sentient beings, am I really the most important one? So now we reorient our focus. In order to reinforce the other-centered attitude, we train in taking the suffering of all sentient beings upon ourselves with great compassion. We imagine or visualize breathing in the suffering of all beings in the form of black smoke that we take into our heart, where our own self-centered attitude and grasping ignorance resides and is very strong. Just as the power of the hot sun causes a fresh flower to wilt, the powerful compassion we begin to feel as we take the suffering of all sentient beings into our heart causes our own self-centeredness to diminish and disappear. We think in this way again and again. As we feel the pain and suffering of others in our heart, strangers, enemies, friends, we let go of our own self-cherishing and open our heart to them. Now we give whatever goodness and happiness we have to them. As we breathe out, we imagine giving our happiness to all beings, wishing them love in the form of light everywhere that purifies and comforts all who are experiencing pain and suffering right now. Whether it be physical pain, emotional pain, the suffering of impermanence and change, or the all-pervasive suffering of samsaric existence. We understand that every sentient being is trapped in the suffering of cyclic existence, which arises from self-centeredness, attachment to self, and self-grasping ignorance. We think, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. We hold these thoughts in our heart and mind. Wishing alone will not cause this to happen. Wishing is not sufficient. Who will take the responsibility of freeing all sentient beings from their suffering and its causes? So we think, I myself will take full responsibility for ending the suffering of all sentient beings and the causes of their suffering. So to do this, now we need to contemplate our own potential. How can I end the suffering of all sentient beings? I myself have fallen into cyclic existence. I haven't yet solved my own problems How can I eliminate the suffering of all other sentient beings? Then we think of the power and the potential of great compassion. If I become a Buddha, I will free all sentient beings from their suffering and its causes and lead them to Buddhahood. The way to lead all sentient beings to genuine, lasting peace, happiness, and freedom is to become a Buddha, an enlightened being. So, for the benefit of all beings, I will become a Buddha. With these thoughts, we awaken our heart and mind of bodhicitta, and we determine to attain enlightenment for the happiness and benefit of each and every sentient being. So this is the um, actual exchanging of self and other. Uh, these are the thoughts that Geshe Nima gave us. And he suggested we do this all the time. Until we gain the conviction through our practice and we see the changes that happen in ourselves slowly, gradually, over time. We gain the conviction that we actually can do this. We can do this. It goes back to the what Kabir was saying about being, I don't know, soldiers in a war against self-cherishing. And it takes, first of all, some basic training, uh, and then it takes engaging in some minor scuffles, and then I think over time our determination and conviction grows.
Something really interesting has been going on quietly in me to do with building the conviction that I can change. And I know you remember this when I first started losing weight, whenever that was, a year or two ago. I really just had the idea that I just want to prove to myself that I can change. And we talked a lot about the time. It's sort of making it a Dharma practice is the way I would put it. It's like if I am meant to change, I need to practice changing towards something positive. And you know, the other thing that's kind of come up recently that similar mental thing, and I'm sharing this because I think we all can use very ordinary things to show ourselves that we're capable of more change than we sometimes want to commit to. They use the term resolute intent. So 3 or 4 days ago, maybe a week ago, I majored in classical guitar in college, but I literally until about 8 months ago could not even play a scale because my hands had become so unaccustomed to the fretboard and everything, all the fine motor skills. So I've been slowly regaining that. And last week, I just, I had somewhere along the line decided I wanted to learn to play in the bossa nova guitar style from Brazil. And so here's the main point. I was trying to learn something And it's very specific and very particular. You can, it has to be done this way if you want it to sound authentic Brazilian. And my old Kavita just went, oh, let me just do something close and good enough. And, I was just gonna, like I have done my entire life on so many arenas, I was just gonna find an easier way and blow it off and sort of, and I could feel this carrying this kind of, I really can't change attitude, but I had this flash like, no, if I just apply some resolute intention in this arena and just, it's not going to take anything other than repetition, in this case. So, I mean, I just share that because it has weirdly affected my Dharma practice and in a positive way, in that it's, the more ways I can demonstrate that I can change, the more confidence it gives me to just, Dawn is always just saying it's just about being kind, So that moment where you just kind of take the choice of, am I going to just do what I habitually do, or am I going to just, you know,
Hmm.
because it's not, to change means you're going to do something you ordinarily wouldn't do.
Right. And that is the point.
Right.
And the point you're making is a very good one. All of us can do this. All of us have things about ourselves that we think we could do better. But we're so habituated to just getting by or doing going down that particular pathway that's not exactly the change we want to make, that we don't actually make the change. And so Kavita's point is really good. We can fold the Dharma into every aspect of our life. And it doesn't have to be going out and saving the world. It has to start with us being able to change for the better and to show ourselves that we can do that. And we can do this in incremental steps. If we can take care of one seemingly small thing like losing weight, which is not so seemingly
I would
small.
even say it could be easier, just decide you're going to make your bed every day and see how that feels.
Seemingly small thing to make your
Right.
bed every day. But what's behind not making your bed every day?
I mean, it's
That's
just
where you
that.
really hit the self-cherishing.
Mhm.
We're lazy. Where we get in our particular habitual ruts and sort of stay there, even though we know that it's not really good for us. So Kavita's point is an excellent one. We don't, that is Dharma. We have to think of everything we do in the light of Dharma.
Right.
And then there's power behind that. And we can grow, we can ascend, you know. So that's a very good point, very practical point.
Um, as it applies to the exchanging self with others, I'm going to experiment with I'm going to just start doing this now. Uh, when I think what I'll do is have when I'm triggered, when something annoys me that I see a person involved saying or doing something that, would typically annoy me. I think I'm going to just experiment with replacing my annoyance with some way to incorporate exchanging self, taking
Hmm.
on doing
Right.
the exchange.
To that end, let's now go into what he taught in the second half of this session. We covered there was a 7-point cause and effect, exchanging self, and then we covered the equalizing and exchanging self with others. Now he's getting into synthesizing the two methods of generating bodhicitta. And these methods are all about generating bodhicitta. Lama Tsongkhapa unified the sevenfold cause and effect method and the equalizing and exchanging self and other method into one method called synthesizing the two methods of generating bodhicitta,
Clever name.
which is one, training in equanimity, two, remembering all sentient beings as our mother. 3, remembering their kindness. 4, wishing to repay their kindness. 5, equalizing self and other. 6, reflecting on the demerits or downfalls of the self-centered attitude. 7, reflecting on the merits of the other-centered attitude or the positive potential that's in the other-centered attitude. 8, the actual practice of exchanging self and other, which is what we did in the opening meditation. 9, taking the suffering of all sentient beings with great compassion. 10, giving all your happiness to others, wishing them love. 11, special resolve or altruism. And 12, finally, bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is the result of all of these methods. So this is the synthesized version of the two methods into one. Geshe Nima says, in our day-to-day life, if we can practice in this way, it's very effective. When we train in the first method, which is the sevenfold cause and effect lineage instruction, first we train in equanimity. When we're talking about equanimity, and we're talking about how in a previous lifetime, all sentient beings have been our mothers or fathers or loved ones, this is sometimes related to a religious belief in reincarnation. So that is very difficult for some people who don't believe in reincarnation and don't believe in previous and future lives. I certainly understand this. It's taken a while to be inclined toward believing that reincarnation is so. The way I do this is I look around and I see the cyclic nature of all existence around me, and I think, okay, so the consciousness will come back. I may not remember being Christopher, but the consciousness and the propensities, just like the seed from a tree that falls into the ground and grows into, has the propensities to be that particular kind of tree. Yeah. So I see that everywhere. So the assumption I make is, well, okay, consciousness is part of this process. Why not? Why should it be somehow completely divorced from everything else that we experience around us that's cyclical? So that's the kind of the way I approach it. The best way for those people who have trouble believing in reincarnation is to train in the second method, which is equalizing and exchanging self with other. That's the meditation that we did at the beginning. Then continue by reflecting on the demerits of the self-centered attitude, reflect on the merits of the other-centered attitude, make the actual exchange of self and other, take in the suffering of others with great compassion, give all your happiness to others, wishing them love, then develop altruism, and then bodhicitta. And he said, this is a more secular way to approach this. If we go with the first instruction to generate equanimity, there's a method that's used, and we learned this early on from Geshe Lama Pasam. We generate equanimity using 3 people. So we imagine that there are 3 people in front of us. The first person is someone who we consider an enemy or a very difficult person. The second person is someone we think of as our friend or a loved one, someone we're close to. The third person is someone who we consider to be neutral, like a stranger. all sentient beings can be divided into these three groups. For the person who you consider an enemy, ask yourself why you think this person is your enemy. Why? And then you try to respond for yourself. I call this person an enemy or difficult because he or she has harmed me in my life. This person abused me or mistreated me. But if we examine in depth and check, our life consciousness is beginningless. Our mental consciousness is beginningless and endless. The person in front of you may be your enemy in this life, but in your previous life, they may have been your parent or dearest mother or friend, and so on. Why don't you consider this person as your loved one? Your attitude or thought, which considers this person as your enemy, is only for this life. In a previous life, that person may have been very kind to you. So you think in this way. And one of the things that I do is I think of people in my past who I was very, very close to, and they were close to me. And yet a situation occurred, karmic situation, where there was abuse, and that person then became the enemy. But having practiced the Dharma now, I can now think of that person and think of that person as the friend that they were without the abuse. So it's possible to do even in this life. So this is something to think about. Um, then the next person in front of you is someone you consider as your friend, your loved one. So you ask yourself, why do I love this person? Why do I respect this person? Because this person has helped me. This person has protected me from danger. Although this person has helped you in this life, in a previous life, they may have harmed you. So I go back to the same example, which we can take from our own life. Someone you know, who we now think of as our enemy, at one time was the person, a close, close friend, very, very dear to us. So we think, well, this is the way it is. Someone's very, very dear to us now, but in a previous life, they could have been nasty. This is just how it is. This is how things go. Then the third person is the one you consider a stranger. You are always indifferent toward that person, neglecting her or his or its well-being. We should, I know we're talking about people, but it also includes all beings. But in a previous life, that person or being may have been your parent or your loved one or your dearest friend. Our current attitude towards these three groups of people, friends, enemies, and strangers, is biased, and it's not honest. We're only looking at them from one side, our self-centered side. Through the wider perspective, there is not a single person who is 100% your friend, 100% your enemy, or 100% a stranger to you. In our day-to-day life, when someone harms us one time, Because of that small reason, we consider that person as an ultimately bad person or an ultimate enemy because of this one action. And sometimes that action can be really small. They just piss us off. Our mind is always biased or partial. So now he's going into the Buddhist perspective of all sentient beings. From the Buddhist perspective, all sentient beings have been our mother, our father, or a loved one in some previous beginningless lifetime. There is not a single person or being we can point to and say, this being has not been my kind mother in a previous life. The reason is that our mental consciousness is beginningless. So every sentient being has been our mother or someone who was kind to us at some point throughout beginningless time. That takes some thinking because beginningless time is a concept that we have trouble even wrapping our conceptual mind around. But if you just try and unwrap it, you'll see there is logic there if you take that on board. It's because those sentient beings have been our kind mothers or parents in other lifetimes that we can consider every sentient being as our loved one or friend. In this life, if someone helps or supports you, you consider them as your friend or loved one because of that action. Then why not consider all sentient beings as your loved one or friend? Every sentient being has been your mother or father or kind loved one in a previous life. When we compare these two logically and reasonably, they're the same. There's another approach that Kavita has mentioned, which helps to get you there. And if Kavita says if she sees someone who perhaps has been difficult for her, she recognizes that for someone, they are their best friend. They are their most loving, kind mother or friend or brother or sister. So it means that that person has within them the capacity to be that kind of person. Just because they're difficult for us means that there's something karmically between us that we need to fix. So that's another way to look at it. Mhm. I think there's a saying, every stranger is a friend we haven't met yet, or something like that. Well, you could say that about every enemy. There is nothing, actually, there is nothing sweeter than two enemies turning it around and becoming close friends. There is nothing sweeter than that.
Um, Initially that thought came to me in working through this sevenfold cause and effect method. And I actually just found it to be a little complicated and ponderous to try to generate this conviction that all beings were my mother. And it felt just practically not necessary
Mhm.
in order to get to the next step, which is to recognize their kindness. And I kind of thought that seems very self-oriented, that I would require that they have been kind to me for me to want to repay their kindness. So I'm if that's to me an important point.
Mhm.
They don't need to have been kind to me for me wanting to repay their kindness. And I think if we look at our lives, it's probably easier if you've had children to look at your children doing nice things for other people and to have that contribute to your goodwill towards your child and wanting to help them even more. In other words, when you see a friend, an enemy, or a stranger, being helpful and kind to anyone or anything, it totally shifts your sense of wanting to support them.
Mm, mm. Or even
Is what
just,
I found.
yeah.
And I'm just going to say again that it came up because I found it too much trouble to have to generate
This is, I mean, I
the
think
idea
this
that they were my
this
mother in
goes to
order for me
the
to think they were worthy of, goodwill.
this goes to the point that Geshe Nima was making about those who are raised in a culture, say the Tibetan culture, they're raised with this idea of reincarnation.
Mm.
The idea that every mother, every sentient being could have been your mother in a previous life is not alien to them. For us, this is not what we were brought up with. So Geshe Nima is suggesting for those of us who have a view that's more like that, that we look at this exchanging self and other from a more mm, a logical and non-religious kind of view, a very practical view.
I just want to repeat myself. It felt very self-oriented to require me to have the concept, oh, this person was my mother in a previous lifetime, therefore they're worthy of me wanting
Right.
to repay their kindness. That feels very
You're going through a lot of steps to,
egoistic. No, it's self-referencing. Like, it has nothing to do with me. They don't need to have been nice to me for them to be worthy of
I
my
think that what we
goodwill.
need to recognize is that everyone is capable of being kind.
Yeah. Mhm.
And if we don't happen to see them being kind in in our view, then we have to look at, well, how are we viewing them? What is our karmic appearance? Why are they appearing that way to us? That's another way to approach it. This is my karmic appearance. How do I change this? This is not what I actually want to be seen. I mean, part of it is that. Part of it is letting go of this ego grasping, I'm right and that person's wrong. They're difficult. Letting go of that and going, actually, I would like to see this in a completely different way. How do I do that?
Mhm.
That at least, we begin to open up the possibilities of our part in all of this. Yeah.
Mhm.
So he says, for example, say when we were a child, about 3 or 4, pretty young, we had a very bad disease and someone helped us and saved our life. And when we were an adult, about 25 or 30, again, we had a bad disease and someone helped us and saved our life. And then later, when we try to bring those two people to mind, one person we can't remember, and another person we can remember. If we neglect the kindness of the person who saved our life as a child, and we only feel grateful to the person who saved our life as an adult, is our way of thinking honest and logical or not? Again, he repeats, our mind is biased. It's dishonest. If you consider the second person as dear to you and a loved one in your life, the first person should also be thought of in the same way. Similarly, we can apply this reason to all sentient beings we have encountered throughout beginningless time. And through that kind of perspective, we can develop the sense or attitude of looking at all sentient beings as being close and dear to us. Through that, we can develop the attitude then of remembering their kindness to us and then wanting to repay their kindness. Then we can develop the attitude of seeing all sentient beings in the light of affection. When we reach this stage, we are more qualified or equipped to generate great compassion. This is unbiased compassion we can extend even toward our enemy. So he's now talking about the importance for us to train in either of these lineages or in either of the ways that he's presented this in order to develop bodhicitta. He says, without training in either of these two lineages, there is no way to cultivate or develop genuine compassion or great compassion, which serves as the foundation of developing bodhicitta. This is very important. Sometimes we try to practice compassion, but our compassion is very biased. We develop compassion when we see someone close to us who suffers or has some problem. With someone else who we consider a difficult person or an enemy, instead of feeling compassion, sometimes we appreciate when they have some problem, thinking, oh, this is good that he or she is having this kind of problem. They're getting what they deserve. We've all done that at some point. So it's very important to study this instruction. I'm just explaining, Geshe Nima is just explaining a very small part of it. If you wish to study or learn more about this kind of instruction, you can get a book about synthesizing the two methods of generating bodhicitta at Amazon or Google. And I put links to Amazon and Google so that you can get it. And then read, and I think it will change. Read, study, and think. Meditate on all of the points. Then try to practice in your day-to-day life. And I think it will change your attitude as well as your behavior. This kind of practice, this exchange of self and other, leaves a strong, deep, and profound imprint on our mental continuum. And this helps us in our future life. And in this life, we can live happily and contentedly. Whether we believe in a next life or not, this kind of practice always protects us from the negative side. So now he's moving on to training in the Four Noble Truths. And he went back to the stanza on the mindfulness recollecting sentient beings. And he read, within the prison of suffering in samsara that is without end. So the stanza starts out. Do you have the stanzas? Mm-hmm. It starts out saying,
If you're looking for the beginning, it's on the other page.
oh, the other page? Okay. Yeah. Starts out saying, it starts out saying, within the prison of suffering and samsara that is without end, the six classes of beings wander. So he's talking about samsara without end, the prison of it. The suffering in samsara is without end unless we make an effort to recognize the suffering nature of the world and try to understand the cause of suffering. If we wish to make an effort in knowing suffering as suffering for what it is and what causes it, the Buddha has already shown us the path to go beyond the suffering nature of the world and how to end suffering. The path the Buddha showed us was the wisdom understanding the empty nature of the world and the understanding of selflessness. If we train in the Four Noble Truths, we can be certain that all our negative emotions, including our contaminated karma, can be cleansed or eradicated from our mind. Then we will be confident that we can control all our suffering. That means we can cut the root cause of suffering. If we control grasping ignorance, we can control the accumulation of more contaminated karma. If we control the accumulation of contaminated karma, we can control our rebirth. Instead of taking rebirth in samsara, we can take a rebirth other than in samsara. Sometimes we misunderstand this kind of thing. For example, the bodhisattva who has reached the fifth ground or bhumi, we've talked about this before. This particular, the fifth ground is called the hard to conquer ground. So a bodhisattva who's reached this level, the fifth ground, comes to this world to help sentient beings. But this kind of rebirth is not controlled by karma. It's not controlled by negative emotion. This kind of rebirth is controlled by the bodhisattva's own unconditional love, compassion, and free will. If we get some realization which controls our negative emotion and contaminated karma, then wherever we go, wherever we take rebirth, we're in control due to our compassion and wisdom. Buddha showed us the path that will keep us from ignorantly staying under the control of contaminated karma and negative emotion. If we're always under the control of contaminated karma and negative emotion, our cycle of suffering will be endless. And whatever we have, or whatever we put our effort into, will just be temporary and not long-lasting. But there is freedom from bondage. Instead of suffering in an endless cycle, what we do is we try to get at the root cause of taking rebirth in samsara so we can change our rebirth. So far, we've taken rebirth due to contaminated karma induced by negative emotion and self-grasping ignorance. Now, through the practice of the Four Noble Truths, we can change that and take on a new path which controls all our negative emotion and contaminated karma. Due to the potential of our own wisdom and our own compassion, the union of our wisdom and compassion, we can take a path where we are reborn to help sentient beings. Many bodhisattvas pray and wish to live in this world for 100,000 years, and that wherever they take rebirth, it is because of compassion and wisdom. Such a rebirth is not bondage, it is freedom from bondage. And as I mentioned earlier, as part of the process to getting there, we can develop the positive karma or the positive potential to take a rebirth in one of these pure lands where we could actually focus all of our attention on completing our studies, achieving the wisdom realizing emptiness and achieving bodhicitta so that we could then happily take a rebirth.
It's like going to West Point.
Yeah.
Or, well, I don't know, where,
What would be
one of these institutes
Yeah.
that you go into once you've finished your basic training, they send you off to.
As long as we're subject to contaminated karma and negative emotion, the very nature of our rebirth is contaminated by ignorance and negative emotion. So sometimes we're not feeling well or we're suffering, this kind of thing. But it is because of contaminated karma and negative emotion that we've taken a body which is by nature contaminated. So we really shouldn't complain. If we wish to go beyond this kind of rebirth, then we should train in the Four Noble Truths. And along with that, train in bodhicitta and the wisdom of emptiness. Through that, we can ascend or reach a state where we are free of the chains and bondage of sickness and aging. So none of that would bother us. Now Geshe Nima is talking about three major teachings that the Buddha gave, and these are called the three turnings of the wheel of Dharma. The Buddha gave three major teachings. The first wheel of teaching is about the Four Noble Truths. Are you happy in this world or not? If you don't wish to live in this condition, there's a way to get out of it. If you don't wish to live in this contaminated existence, then practice the Four Noble Truths. Along with that, if you wish to not only get out of this contaminated existence, you practice bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness. The second wheel of teaching that the Buddha taught was the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. This is the explicit content of the second wheel of teaching, the wisdom of emptiness. The implicit content of the second wheel of teaching is about bodhicitta, the union of wisdom and method. If we practice this, this leads to Buddhahood. This kind of path not only frees you from all suffering, but because of this path, you can lead every sentient being to the state or path you have achieved, benefiting yourself, but benefiting all other beings instead. Then the third wheel of teaching is connected with unconditioned clear light. So we've talked about this, the clear light mind, unconditioned clear light. You are a human being in this world compared to other sentient beings. Human beings in this current world have more opportunities in terms of bodily function. The human nervous system and energetic system of winds, drops, and channels. If you practice with the drops or wind channels, your practice relates to the tantric method. You don't have to wait many lifetimes to become a Buddha. Within this life, you can have the opportunity to achieve Buddhahood. So those are the three major turnings of the wheel of Dharma that the Buddha gave. The third has to do with Tantra. The second has to do with the union of wisdom and bodhicitta, or wisdom and method. And the first has to do with the Four Noble Truths, practicing the Four Noble Truths. Now he's going to get into an interesting topic, which are the characteristics of a degenerate age. And so we can decide for ourselves what we're in. We can decide for ourselves. We'll just hear the characteristics.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, of course, he starts right up by saying, we are now in a degenerate age. In the Buddhist texts, there are 5 types of degenerations or declines in a degenerate age. Okay, so here's the first type. The degeneration of sentient beings. This is character. Just wait and hear what it's characterized by. This is characterized by
Did you say human beings or
sentient
Okay.
beings, the degeneration of sentient beings. The reason this is interesting is because we get this one. There's not a lot of trouble for us to see this. So this is characterized by a decline in physical form, intellect, good health, and so on. The second type of degeneration in a degenerate age is the degeneration of emotions and delusions, disturbing emotions and delusions. This is characterized by the thriving of negative emotions, and delusions.
Enough said. Well, it's
Yeah.
right now we're in a
All right. The fourth degeneration or decline in a degenerate age.
I mean the third.
Sorry. The second. I got the second one wrong. Let's go back. Doesn't really matter, but the second degeneration of views is the second degeneration is the degeneration of views. Views, okay? This is characterized by a proliferation of wrong and mistaken views. And I think we can sort of see that happening. So then the third one is the degeneration of disturbing emotions and delusions, which is characterized by the thriving of negative emotions. The fourth is the degeneration of lifespan. And this is simply characterized by a shortening of the length of life. I'm not completely sure of that one. I
They
mean,
say that,
Well, if you
somebody
had-
said that the lifespan, believe it or not, he said it would get down to age 10.
yeah, this is
And ours
what,
is, you
yeah,
know, I mean, in
yeah.
the US anyway, it's.
that would be a totally different kind of a world, right?
Yeah.
If a being lived 10 years, that would be like some kinds of animals or
Well, you can
insects or
see,
things.
you know,
Yeah,
like right now,
yeah,
kids are reaching puberty younger than even when I was at puberty age, it was
right.
normal that, you know, you were maybe 13, 14, 15 before you started your period, and now they're starting their period when they're 9 years old.
Well, even beyond that, even if you took that out of the equation, say we blow ourselves up or,
Well, true.
and
Yeah.
so the only thing left on the planet is some
Nice.
kind of life form that can live for a maximum of 10 years in the residue that
That's a good
exists.
point.
You know, it could be something like that. We don't
Yeah.
know. We're so human centric that we always think in terms
That's
of
a good
us,
point.
right?
I mean, it sounds kind of.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you look at different sources of historical information, you know, it's been said that historically humans or human-like beings lived to the 800s and
Oh, yeah.
900s.
Yeah.
And here we're
Right.
living to, you know,
Only
maybe
100
80.
years.
Right.
So when you take that, that's a multiple factor by 10. So we reduced it to 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're there. We're doing it. Got that goal. Check.
Okay. And then so that's the shortening of the length of life.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Then the fifth type of degeneration or decline in a degenerate age is the degeneration of time. And this is characterized by a decline in the quality of things. Food has less taste and nutrition. Crops fail to ripen, and so on. In a degenerate age, many people are always attached to the outside world instead of making an effort to practice the Dharma. If we speak frankly, we're mainly interested in feeding our stomachs and having a sheltered place to live and sleep. If we look at things from a wider perspective, according to the Buddhist point of view, we appear to be content with a very small purpose. We think this life is very short, but from a wider perspective, life is beginningless and endless. So if in this life we have some problem, don't worry. There are lots of opportunities coming our way. And so now he goes through a completion of the stanza on, yeah, we're doing quite well. The mindfulness recollecting sentient beings. So then he reads, the six classes of beings wander bereft of happiness. This is referring to the beings that wander within the desire realm. Actually, when we're talking about cyclic existence, it is comprised of three realms: the desire realm, the form realm, and the formless realm. Explicitly, this stanza is talking about the desire realm. Implicitly, we also think about the form and formless realms, which are included within cyclic existence. Within the desire realm, we have 6 different kinds of beings. 1, hell beings. 2, hungry ghost beings. 3, animal beings. 4, human beings. 5, demigod beings. And 6, God beings. And I think in the past we've discussed these in a lot of detail. Due to negative karma and deluded emotions, we all wander in samsara without any freedom or lasting happiness. Actually, in cyclic existence, we experience what we think is happiness, but it is always transient, short-lived, and eventually changes to suffering. So this kind of happiness is not real happiness. For example, say we don't have a good house, so we buy a new house and we feel happy. After a few days, we need this thing and that thing, and then the frustration starts in. And we all know where it goes from there. It just doesn't stop. So this is not real happiness. This is just the change of one suffering to another kind of suffering. Within samsara, all the pleasant feelings we consider as happiness are really the suffering of change according to the Buddhist perspective. So that was that part of the stanza. And then he goes to the next line. Your very own parents who nurtured you with such care, right there. The 6 classes of beings that we just mentioned who wander in samsara are your very own parents. Actually, as Geshe Nima mentioned before, they have been our parents in countless previous lives. The person who was our parent in a previous life and the person who has been our parent in this life is no different. The way they treat us, the way they help us is the same, not different. If we think this through in a logical way, they are the same. And I remember Geshe Nima said, we had a conversation, I think it was Don Kavita and I, Geshe Nima, and he said, the most important thing that a parent gives you is your human life. Your human life, this life that has a body, that has these particular kinds of functions, that if we develop them, we can actually have an experience of the clear light awareness, the clear light mind. That can be done because we have a human body with the drops and the winds and the channels that he was talking about. So regardless of what kind of parent you're one that you had or have, or in this life or previous lives, they are the fact that you are human is a tremendous gift right there. So even if you just look at it that way, just look at it from this life, this one life, forget what your parents were like, whether you loved them, whether they were kind to you, whatever. They gave you this body that has all of these functions, channels, drops, and winds, which will enable us to go all the way to Buddhahood in one lifetime if we put in the effort. So that's an amazing gift. That's my own little sideline on that. But Geshe Nima mentioned it. So he says, if we think this through in a logical way, all beings are the same in terms of how they have helped you. Then the next line in that stanza is, abandoning attachment and aversion, meditate on cherishing others and on compassion. So Geshe Nima says, don't have attachment toward your loved one. Don't hold aversion toward a difficult person or someone you consider as an enemy. They are the same. All sentient beings are the same. If we go back to the equalizing and exchanging self and other, the meditation we did at the beginning, all sentient beings are the same. And the way they are the same is that all sentient beings want to be happy and they don't want to suffer. And the problem that we all have is we don't know how to go about doing that. We're going about it in the wrong way. We're going about it in a very self-centered way. Instead of understanding the interdependent relation of all things, uh, phenomena and sentient beings. When we see that interdependent relationship, then we recognize, ah, all beings want happiness. They don't want to suffer. We're interrelated. I need to figure out how to go about doing this, and how to help others to do this, because this is basically our nature. It's our nature. So our nature is interdependent. So we try to cultivate the other-centered attitude toward all sentient beings and extend great compassion toward all sentient beings. And then he goes to the final line in that stanza. Without allowing the mind to wander, remain in a state of compassion. Without losing mindfulness, remain in a state of compassion. So Geshe Nima says, don't allow your mind to wander due to attachment or aversion. Remain in a state of great compassion, looking at all sentient beings as the same, in the same condition. And please meditate on this. As I look at our day-to-day life here in this household, the household of Kavita, Donald, and Christopher, one of the things that we tend to do and talk about on a daily basis are current events and what's going on in the news. So I want to, and I know all of you are similar in this. So I want to just repeat what he said. Do not allow your mind to wander due to attachment or aversion. So in other words, use these current events. What's on the news, what's on Twitter, what's on X, what's on Facebook and everything else, YouTube. Use all of that to trigger a little bell in your mind that says, I am not going to allow my mind to wander due to attachment towards one side and aversion towards another side. I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is what Geshe Nima is telling me to do, which is remain in a state of great compassion, looking at all sentient beings, both sides, no matter what, as the same, in the same condition, in the same condition. And he says, please meditate on that. So we have our task ahead of us. Just in
Repeat that just before that, please meditate on
Can
it.
you pick one person at a time?
I think
To feel sorry for and have compassion for. Or do we have to do them all at the same time?
well, I mean, you can start with one. Yeah,
Okay.
why not?
Gotta start somewhere.
Right. All right. All right. So I'll read the whole thing. Here's the stanza. Without allowing the mind to wander, remain in a state of compassion. Without losing mindfulness, remain in a state of compassion. And here's what Geshe Nima said again: don't allow your mind to wander due to attachment or aversion. Remain in a state of great compassion, looking at all sentient beings as the same, in the same condition, the same state of mind. This self-grasping, self-cherishing, completely clueless to the actual interdependent nature of who and what we are. Um, this is our task. This is what we must do. So he says, please meditate on this. And then he said, now I stop the teaching. Thank you. So I mean, that's a really powerful particular section on recollecting, having a recollection of the importance of sentient beings. It's everything. It is other sentient beings, including the fire ants and everything in between fire ants and humans, um, is part of this interdependent state of being.
Yeah.
And we are not habituated to thinking that way. We're habituating to thinking me, mine, me and mine, me and mine, me and mine. And then anything that's not related or gets in the way of me and mine is either we're indifferent towards it, or if it's really getting in the way, we have strong aversion. So we're not taking it into being all part of me and mine.
I mean, look at the fire ants as you gave an example of. If you step on a fire ant mine, they are going to attack you. If you walk by their mound, they're okay, it's not been a problem, but they are all encompassed about me and mine. My troop, my eggs, my mound, all of that kind of stuff,
Bees,
right?
wasps.
Yeah, all of it, right. So they don't have the opportunity to do anything else other than that because they don't have a human rebirth. So
Right.
they're just stuck in their loop and they will do what they do. They cannot help themselves. We at least have the opportunity to help ourselves once we have that realization. Oh, I can change this. I can change my mind. I can change how I view the world. I can change my perspective. Equal, change the view. Change what's actually happening out there once you see it clearly.
It's astounding, really.
Yeah.
And this goes back to what Geshe Nima had said, how grateful we should be to our human parents for giving us, for being able to have this human body with this brain.
Right.
I mean, the wasps and the fire ants and the bees, they have consciousness, but they don't have the brain that the consciousness can work through like we do.
Right.
Or the winds and the channels and the whole particular structure of a human.
Right. It does cause me to want to understand more what it is about the channels, drops, and winds.
He's obviously telling us this because he's planting seeds. I think he has an intention of going further with this in the future with us. He wouldn't say this otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's just he's dropping that seed there for us to
knowing
think.
Our capacity, right?
Right. And that is the capacity that a human has, particularly when they engage on a path such as this one. I would say that the Hindu path is so similar to the Buddhist path. But all this, the channels, the drops and the winds and all of that is in the Hindu path. The part that the Buddha brought, the Buddha was raised in that Hindu environment. The unique and the unique game changer that the Buddha brought into the whole equation was emptiness. That everything is empty of any kind of independent self-existence.
Right.
Everything is interdependent and arises dependently and has no And then that is constantly changing. It's constantly in flux. So there's never a time that we can pinpoint anything and say, this is exactly that thing.
Right.
And as we've discussed before when we talked about the two truths, so much of how we view things is simply how we project what we project from our mind, our consciousness, onto all of these things.
Right.
All the labels that we give everything, they're merely labels. There actually is nothing substantially there that is the thing that we are labeling as being so substantially there and solid. And that's very important for us as humans to take the opportunity we have with the kind of brain and mind that we have to think about that,
Right.
to really become familiar with that and see the logic of that, test it out for ourselves. It's an incredible, and that's a huge thing. What the Buddha brought to this, all of the meditation techniques and things like that, they all arose out of this incredible, wonderful Hindu culture. As I've studied some of it, I cannot believe they had atomic scientists back in the, third century BCE and before, I mean, it's amazing. And we're just now really getting into quantum fields, whereas yogis were aware of all of this kind of stuff. They didn't give it those
Right, they
names,
didn't give it
but
the same label, but
they
yeah.
were aware. They were aware of this thing.
Mhm.
And so you add this interdependent empty nature to that, and it just takes off, completely takes off. It's transformative, really transformative. So I mean, how fortunate we are, to be together, to be interested in this together, to have these teachers from this lineage.
That's just my I go like, how is this possible? How is this happening? Like,
Yeah.
in the middle of little old Texas, in Antonio.
Right in your own bare living room.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's just, it's kind
we've
of.
got the connection
Yeah.
to this lineage. It's just incredible. It is.
So one of the things they say is that we should rejoice in that. There's an important part of the seven limb practice, which is about, developing your positive potential and your wisdom. But one of the most important and the easiest things we can do is rejoice. We can rejoice in our own good qualities, the fact that we have met the Dharma, that we have the kind of life we do, and that we're practicing and studying this, and we have these teachers. We can rejoice in that, and we can rejoice in one another. All of the good qualities that we see in one another. That's where we should focus on. That's what we should focus on. We should focus on that and rejoice in that. And they say that is the easiest way to accumulate huge amounts of positive potential.
Yeah, it relates to this thing I was saying about instead of needing to see them as your mother, you're just gonna rejoice, and start right there,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean that's quite actually that's an advanced level that you're doing there. I think. I mean you're going
Yeah.
you're
Well,
going
I guess,
directly
yeah.
to what the Buddha is telling us to do. You're skipping the part of going, all right, they must have been my mother.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think perhaps it's just as a natural part of the thing,
Yeah,
the evolution of our consciousness.
yeah. What I will say is something I said before is that as one really begins to practice this, and that only comes through a regular daily routine. That's when it happens. And as you begin to practice this, all of your previous relationships, maybe the bad relationships you have, they begin to shift, they change. You see it much, much differently. And you actually begin to develop gratitude and, yeah, joy that you met that other person.
Mhm.
I mean, one of the things you could say is if it weren't for the suffering situations in each of our lives, we wouldn't be compelled to take the steps we have taken to be here right now. We wouldn't have.
Yeah.
We would have just gone, oh, give me more of the good stuff. We'd be just, find every wonderful thing out there to grasp onto, and I'll be happy. But we have a particular pathway that we have that has brought us here. And so in some ways, I feel extremely grateful to all of my own personal predecessors, everybody who's influenced me in my life, my, friends, my family, my grandparents, great grandparents, the whole lineage that brought me here with all of its baggage actually delivered me right here. And so I feel just huge gratitude toward all of that. And and I feel like what I want to do is um, fix all of it, heal all of it, you know, and that it can be done because it can be done in our mind. We can do it in our mind. So, anything else? Closing? Now I stop the teaching. Thank you.
Well, um, shall we just start with the guru dedication?
Yeah.
In all my rebirths, may I never
Be
be separated
separated
from perfect
from
spiritual masters and enjoy the
splendor
magnificent
of
Dharma,
Dharma.
completing all qualities of the states
Specials.
of paths. May I quickly achieve the state of Vajradhara. May anyone who merely sees or hears, remembers, touches, or talks to me
Be instantly free from all sufferings and abide in happiness forever.
It
It is only from the kindness of my gurus
that
that I have met the purest teachings of the Buddha.
Thus, I dedicate all merit so that all sentient beings in the future may be guided by kind and holy gurus. And then remembering the incredible impact that His Holiness the Dalai Lama has had on us through all of our teachers and his teaching. In the snowy mountain paradise, you're the source of all goodness and happiness. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso Shenrezig, may you stay until samsara ends. I just want to say, claiming that he is the source of all goodness and happiness is meant to recall the lineage, the impact and the profound. I mean, we would not be, as we've said before, we would not be practicing Buddhism today here in the West without His Holiness.
Right.
And His Holiness is profound inspiration of all of our teachers.
It's traveled around the world. It really has.
Anyway, I think with that, just we'll end it there.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Alrighty. Okay, y'all out there in our Zoom brethren. Peace to y'all. Have a good week. We'll see you next time. And let me stop our recording.
Adios, amigos.